August 2020, AxieInfinity had less than 500 daily active users. Less than a year later, they nearly hit 3 million. There's something for everyone, whether you like first-person shooter games or you like strategy card games, there's just something for everyone. With fully on-chain games, if you do have everything on a blockchain, it does make it fully decentralized. Traditionally, blockchains are not designed to be fast and easy to use. There are people in the next province over playing a blockchain game to put food on the table. There's a lot of different opinions in this space, but the one thing that we can all agree is being able to deliver that sense of true digital ownership to players is the really big change that we see in Web3 gaming.
Well, I know what I'm going to be researching for the next couple of days now that you've told me about fully on-chain games. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Token Talks, brought to you as ever here from our studio in sunny Singapore where the aircon is always set to high. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different to usual because we're doing it remotely for the first time. That's because we're traversing Singapore and Philippines, and I'm delighted to welcome Leah onto today's show. Hey Leah.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Leah. My company is called Emfarsis, and we invest in and advise early stage Web3 projects with a big focus on Web3 gaming and open metaverse. Our special expertise is in strategic communications. So we work with founders at a really early stage of their business to help them figure out how they're actually going to communicate to the rest of the world who they are, what they're doing, and what problem they're solving, which probably sounds a lot simpler than it really is in Web3 because often they're doing stuff that's never been done before. So we'll come in and help them really tease that story out and share it with the world. I also sit on the board of the Blockchain Game Alliance, which is the industry organization for blockchain gaming. They've been around since 2018. And I also write a regular opinion column for CoinDesk. And that's been mainly focused since 2020 on how Web3 is being adopted in Southeast Asia, all around the region, and how it's improving millions and millions of people's lives.
Amazing. Thanks so much. Listen, we're going to talk a lot more about Blockchain Game Alliance, Emfarsis, and indeed your role as an opinion columnist later on. But before we kind of dig into things, I would love to hear a little bit more about kind of what sparked your interest for this space in the beginning, how you got into kind of blockchain, crypto, Web3, if there was an aha moment, if there was anything like that for you.
I think my story is a bit unconventional because I think most people kind of get attracted to this space when numbers go up and they kind of come in for, some of the financial use cases. But for me, it was actually, I spent the first 5 years of my career working in renewable energy and sustainability, specifically in industrial scale and commercial solar thermal units. I left that industry in a huff because I felt like, long story short, the whole thing was completely greenwashed. And I really felt like there was a lot of people talking about saving the world and actually doing something good for the environment when really all they cared about was the bottom line. And I didn't think the right incentives or economic incentives were in place to actually get people on board with the movement. So anyway, I was like, I'm done here. Moved on, and I was telling the story to a mentor of mine a few years later, and he kind of had this smirk on his face. I was listening to this whole story. And he said, I'm going to send you a case study. And it was a project, I don't know if you've heard about it, but it was called the Brooklyn Microgrid. I think it must have started out about 2018, but it was the first time that they proved energy trading on the blockchain. And it was really amazing in terms of what they were doing around applications. They had people who were referred to as prosumers who had more solar panels on their roof than they possibly needed. So they were producing enough energy to run their own household, but then they could actually trade that energy with their neighbors or even donate it to a school down the road. It's a fabulous use case. If you want to get into it, go check it out. But for me, this was fantastic because, I really started to see how for a particular issue, which was so pressing and so important, something like energy sustainability, that people were really starting to think about how technology could completely reimagine the structures that currently govern our society and how we actually create and share value. So it took me a while to get my head around it because also trading energy on the blockchain is not as simple as just, updating numbers in a ledger. But it really it really caught my imagination. And after discovering that, I thought I want to learn more about this space, and I think maybe I want to have a career pivot and make sure that I'm, you know, I'm there to see this technology change the world. So yeah, that was the beginning. But from there, I got into the payment side of things. I was very interested in terms of how blockchain could be used to include people who had been traditionally excluded by the financial system. And I was actually working on building a crypto payments gateway in 2018, which was what brought me to the Philippines, where I'm based now. The reason we came to the Philippines was because we were outsourcing talent to the Philippines. So I think a lot of foreign companies do this. You know, they'll have a team in the Philippines, but you know, the rest of the team is based elsewhere. We were doing that, and the team really wanted to take on more complicated tasks. And we were willing for them to have that opportunity, have that exposure, but we thought we should probably be in the office with them at the time. So that's why we came here physically. I guess another factor, just to quickly throw it in there about the Philippines that really got me excited, was that if you haven't heard of it before, there's a term which is OFWs. It stands for Overseas Filipino Workers. And there's a very large portion of the population that are working all around the world and sending money home to family in the Philippines. You know, it sort of makes up around about 10% of GDP in the Philippines. So most Filipinos, even if they're in the furthest flung provinces, they are very used to this idea of receiving foreign currency from overseas and not having a bank account. So they have to be able to go and find some kind of cash out center to be able to turn, you know, USD or Great British pounds or whatever it might be into Philippine pesos, physical cash. And very early on, sort of around like 2015, 2016, Philippines started to experiment with crypto asset-backed remittances, which could use crypto to reduce the cost and time it would take to send money home to the Philippines. So yeah, when 2020, I guess my excitement peaked because we saw that adoption miracle actually happen, and it was with AxieInfinity, the Web3 game that just absolutely went parabolic here in the Philippines. I should probably stop there because like after that, it's just like a whole different story, but that was kind of how I got to the Web3 gaming part of my life, which is now pretty much 100% of the focus.
I know a little bit about you and some of the things you've worked on. And one of the things that I came across was, I guess like a mini documentary called Play to Earn, if I'm not mistaken, right? And I watched this a couple of days ago and I absolutely loved it. Would you mind telling us a little bit about that? Because I think it was kind of a nice segue into it, where you just came from.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I was already excited about crypto in the Philippines. We felt like this adoption miracle was going to happen. As I said, it felt like a pressure cooker, but not in a million years did I think it was going to be a blockchain game that was going to really send things crazy. But it was actually pandemic times. We were locked down at home. It was mid-2020. And the Philippines had, I believe, the longest lockdown in the whole world. So we're all sitting there with nothing to do. A lot of Filipinos had lost their jobs. A lot of people worked in sort of low-skilled service sector jobs, which really required you to be out on the street, you know, like either driving a taxi or driving a trike or selling food on the street. And obviously when you were locked down, you couldn't do that. So a lot of people were left very desperate. And it was around this time that a good friend of mine had called me up and said, you know, you're never going to believe this, but there are people in the next province over playing a blockchain game to put food on the table amid the pandemic. And I thought that was the most wild thing I'd ever heard. So I didn't really believe it at first and decided to go and investigate. But lo and behold, it was true. The way we actually found out about this and how the phenomenon was really, you know, there was something special there, was that Sky Mavis, who are the developers of AxieInfinity, the game, they had been doing their usual scan to see if there were bots exploiting the game. Because, you know, any game with financial incentives, you kind of have to assume there's going to be bots on there trying to, you know, take all the goods. And they found this particular IP address in the Philippines that had up to 20 accounts operating on it around the clock. So they kicked them off. And then a family reached out to appeal the ban. And they said, you know, please don't kick us off. This is our livelihood. You know, we really need this game and we're real people. We're not bots. And they said, all right, well, you're going to have to send us video evidence to prove it. And there is this video, it's like a family sitting on the floor and in a circle. And the guy who's taking the video, he's like, well, this is my sister, and this is my brother-in-law, and this is my cousin, and this is my other cousin, and my brother. And, they're just playing and they're kind of annoyed. Like they sort of look up like, why are you annoying me? Like, get away, I'm trying to get back to my game. And yeah, that was how we first found out about it. So I wrote this article about it for my opinion column. I didn't really think that much of it at the time. I just thought it was another interesting use case for blockchain. But the article ended up going viral. And then we saw at the time, so like just to put this into perspective, at that time, August 2020, AxieInfinity had less than 500 daily active users, or DAU. Less than a year later, they nearly hit 3 million. So the growth in this thing was just out of this world. And we started to see it immediately just after that first article, and we saw lots of Filipinos onboarding. It was pretty interesting. Like a lot of people were saying, like, why the Philippines? Like, why is it happening there and not anywhere else? And I think there's a number of factors. Like I already mentioned some of them. The high English language literacy is a big thing. Other emerging economies where, some of these people were making like maybe $300 a month playing this game. I mean, that's a lot of money for most people, but in the Philippines at the time, it was on par with minimum wage. And they were able to get into this game because they didn't necessarily need any sort of onboarding materials translated for them to be able to understand. But then it's also a very community-based, family-based culture. So what we saw was that a lot of these people who kind of already knew their way around crypto, because maybe they had been receiving crypto asset-backed remittances from people overseas that were sending money home, they started hand-holding other people. Like, here, I'll show you how to get in. I'll show you how to set up a wallet. I'll show you how to store your seed phrase, and all those things that are really difficult in crypto if you're trying to get in for the first time. So we just we saw it take off from there. And it was around December that my friend Gabby Dizon, who I had actually interviewed for that original article, he rang me and he was like, that article's really doing the rounds. Have you thought about making it into a video? I was like, no, I'm not a filmmaker. I don't do like video content, but how hard could it be? Let's just do it. And it turns out it's very difficult, but we did it. And honestly, I didn't think anyone would watch it. Like back then, no one was saying the word NFT yet. No one knew what a blockchain game was, let alone an Axie. I thought it would be just like this really niche content that some of our friends in the Philippines would probably watch. But it ended up being reported on by CNBC. We went on to win an international short documentary film award for it. It was featured on media all around the world. And I think the best thing for me with that was that we had kind of been on our soapbox for years already saying, look at the Philippines, like something special is going to happen here with crypto adoption. Don't sleep on it. And we were just, our messaging was falling on deaf ears. So finally, everyone turned around and went like, whoa, what's happening in the Philippines? I need to know more about this.
Great. I really recommend everybody to go in and check it out. We'll put a link to the video in the comments of the video afterwards. You teed up the next section that I really wanted to move into nicely there, Leah. You kind of mentioned, I guess, some of the perceptions and even misconceptions people have of blockchain gaming. And we're really lucky today to have a little bit of alpha to share with everybody because Leah, along with some of her colleagues, has been hard at work on something called the Blockchain Gaming Alliance State of the Industry Report. Did I get that right? Close?
Very well done, yes.
Okay, which I have read. Would you please tell us a little bit about it? It's my first time around reading it this year, but I know it's something you guys have worked on in the past as well.
Yes, it's our third year doing it. And I guess, one thing to, as you say, dovetail nicely into this next bit, we were just talking about a film called Play to Earn, which was all about, people earning money from these games and treating it as a job during the pandemic. The industry has moved so far beyond that now in, a very short time frame. The space just moves so quickly. and we can track a lot of what's happening in terms of on-chain data around game activity, wallet activity, even fundraising. But I think, the space is also quite sentiment driven. So the idea is that we really wanted to check in with the people who are building this space from the ground up and see how they're thinking about the current state of the industry. What are their opinions and where do they think it's going next? Oh, sorry, before we dive into it, I should just mention too, so I sit on the board of the Blockchain Game Alliance, but I was only elected this year by a community vote, which I'm very, very happy to be contributing to the organization in that way. But in terms of this report, this is a project that my company Emfarsis has partnered with the BGA on for the past 3 years. So they're kind of separate things, but I love having any opportunity to be able to represent the BGA and talk about what they're doing. So this is just one of the specific things that we do with them. Anyway, back to our usual programming. So demographics. So the big 3 takeaways that we have this year are nearly 80%, so 79.7% of people think that they are still going to be working in blockchain gaming over the next year. That might sound like kind of a boring takeaway, but to put it into perspective, this year has been, from what I understand, some people say it's the worst year for layoffs in the gaming industry in 15 years. There was over 8,000 people who lost their jobs in gaming this year, over 2,000 people laid off in crypto in the first 2 months of the year alone, and even broader layoffs in tech. So I think that's a really interesting marker in terms of blockchain gaming professionals and their confidence that this industry still has legs, that they don't think that they're going to lose their job or have to find something else to do in the next 12 months, which I think is a very, very big one. The next one is 44.3% received crypto or stable coins as their pay in 2023. That one for me is an exciting one as well, because there are certainly a lot of crypto companies out there that don't actually kind of walk the talk. Like, we find that they're not actually invoicing, they're not paying their staff in crypto, they're not actually using these new financial rails. So what we've found time and time again with blockchain gaming is that they really are leveraging all the tools available to them and really kind of leaning into the culture. And the third one, which is a concerning one, is that at 16.9% female participation in the survey, it is the lowest that we have ever seen women's representation in this data set. Look, honestly, it's probably not surprising. I think the tech space in general has always had a problem with women's participation around gender diversity. But it is something that the BGA has made a very, very big focus for the past 3 years in terms of trying to put together initiatives that can encourage women to learn more about blockchain gaming or have safe spaces where they can come along and network and so on. But it doesn't seem like we're doing enough. So that is definitely something that will be a big focus for the BGA in the year going ahead, because they are very responsive to this survey. It's an opportunity for them to take a pulse on the industry in terms of what are the issues and what is important to people, so they can figure out how they need to invest their time and energy in initiatives going forward. I'll stop there. I'm not sure if you've got further questions or if you want to unpack any of that.
No. It's a really good lowdown. Thanks for I guess introing the demographic part of it. I mean, just on the last point, it is really interesting, and I mean, particularly in the context of gaming, right, where we know there is actually on the consumer side a really big appetite for gaming from females. So that's kind of a shame that there is that imbalance.
I mean, the thing is, it's not like there aren't amazing women in the space. I mean, there are truly incredible leaders, and I think we do definitely have people that we can look up to. And one thing I'd love to call out that the BGA did this year, which I thought was a very bold move, was install a completely new board. So previously, it was an all-male board with 1 female member. So I think it was 9 men and 1 woman, 1 female. And now it is a gender balanced board. So we have 3 men, 3 women. And, I think that was a very bold move. It's one of those things where, you can kind of sit around and wait for change, or you can make it happen. So it's things like that, making sure that we have that representation from a whole range of different viewpoints, because, many studies have shown that the value of having diverse boards, diverse teams, diverse communities is not because, it's a nice corporate social responsibility tick the box thing. It's because if you have lots of different people around the table who can come at a problem or opportunity from lots of different viewpoints, just because they have very, very different backgrounds and understandings of the world, you will naturally come up with more robust products, better solutions to problems. So that's why I feel really passionate about it, and very excited to be involved with an organization that takes it seriously rather than just paying lip service.
For sure. Yeah, hats off to the BGA board and community for taking that step. You have to remind me the next section we were going to go into of the report.
So the next one is the drivers, what people think is pushing the industry forward. This one is a resounding number one. 76.2% of people recognize that digital asset ownership is the number one top benefit of blockchain gaming, and they have done so for the 3 years that we're running this survey. There's a lot of different opinions in this space, but the one thing that we can all agree is that being able to deliver that sense of ownership or true digital ownership to players is the really big change that we see in Web3 gaming. And some of the comments that we got, or qualitative quotes from the members and other industry professionals that answered the survey, kind of showed that we've really only scratched the surface in terms of what that means and how it could also create entirely new experiences for gamers and really transform the industry, or the gaming industry as we know it today. So that's the number one thing keeps coming up. The next would be, this is a growing trend, but 37.8% foresee that Web2 game studios are going to drive the industry forward. So basically what that means is the biggest Web2 studios in the whole world, who have published some of the most much-loved games, over the past decades, they're the ones, when they come in and say they're going to do something in Web3, that you really want to watch. So, when you get something like, for example, CCP, which are the makers of EVE Online, very, very popular game that's been around for 2 decades, or Nexon that makes MapleStory, likewise, been around for about 2 decades. They represent millions and millions and millions and millions of players who are suddenly going to be exposed to a Web3 game within the context of something that they already love.
Sorry, Leah, just to jump in on that point. So the Web 2 versus Web 3 thing in gaming, I think is particularly interesting, right? Because it feels like a very obvious use case because, the realm of Web 3 potentially offers new experiences for players and new ways to experience gameplay. And then, as you said, kind of all the themes related to digital assets and asset ownership, be that identity or tradable assets, whatever it might be. I think, though, kind of one of the barriers has always been, or a couple of the barriers have been things like wallets, onboarding, et cetera, because they're very new to like a Web2 audience. So where do you think we stand today? Are we, because a lot of people are talking about blockchain gaming, GameFi moving into 2024 and it being a big year. We can see on some of the big chains, even on AVAX recently, a lot of stuff happening in the gaming space. Are we at a point, do you think, where the Web2 communities are going to be able to overcome some of those barriers, or where do we stand?
Well, that is actually in our industry challenges bit. And as it consistently comes up all the time, we have already seen some massive studios come across, and they have very clearly laid out their plans to launch these new games. And as you just pointed out, one of the traditional problems in terms of getting Web2 users into Web3 has been that onboarding friction. So 55.1%, well over half, and that's more than last year. I think last year it was like 52%. They still see onboarding as the number one primary issue for the industry. I think that's good though, because everyone is very cognizant of that. And I think there's 2 things that we've seen over the past year that are moving towards solving that issue, or at least alleviating some of those issues. The first is this emergence of, some people refer to it as Web 2.5 games, or other people are sort of pointing out that we're seeing the free-to-play model being implemented in blockchain games. If we go back to mid-2020, when I was looking at these communities in the rural Philippines playing AxieInfinity, to play the game at that time, you had to own NFTs up front. So in order to be able to do that, you had to be able to set up a wallet, go and buy, Ethereum from a licensed exchange locally in the Philippines and do all your KYC and everything like that. And then you would go to an open marketplace and buy your Axies. You'd send your Axies into battle. You'd win this really obscure ERC20 token called SLP. And then you'd have to go to a decentralized exchange like Uniswap to sync and swap it out for Ethereum again, and then off ramp back into Philippine pesos. I mean, that's a lot of hoops to jump through for someone who is just trying to get into a Web3 game. But at the time, the incentive was really there because people were excited about the money to be earned. Moving forward, people don't want to have to go through that much, particularly if you don't even know yet if you like the game. So what a lot of people have done is remove a lot of that upfront friction. You don't have to have NFTs to play most of these games. A lot of them, you don't even have to connect a wallet. So you can at least get in, have some fun. And then further down the line, it's a little bit like the more you get involved with the game, the more engaged you are, the more you enjoy it, then you kind of have the option to take ownership. Maybe that's because you have earned some tokens while playing the game, or maybe like you've earned a really cool skin or a weapon or something like that, or you want to buy one. Traditionally, blockchains are not designed to be fast and easy to use. So they are going, well, how can we actually change this experience for future games, and also to make it simpler for devs to interact with them as well. So yeah, I think it's happening. It's not going to happen overnight, but there are different ways that people are dealing with the onboarding challenge. It certainly hasn't gone away, but it's definitely top of mind. This is the biggest misconception about blockchain gaming, and it has also come up again and again. More than 70% of people are battling the misconception that blockchain gaming is a scam. And I think that's a really high figure, but probably not that surprising, given that a lot of these games are financialized. And let's face it, there have been a lot of scams, rug pulls, security issues, very bad actors in the space. Unfortunately, I think a lot of the legitimate founders are feeling like those bad actions are reflecting on the whole industry. And it's something that they're really fighting against, but it sounds like it's not getting any easier for them. So this is pretty bullish. 52.1% of survey respondents said that they think at least 20% of the gaming industry will adopt blockchain within the next year. And you know what? It's bullish, but I don't think it is hard to believe. We have already seen some massive studios come across, and they have very clearly laid out their plans to launch these new games. And as you just pointed out, one of the traditional problems in terms of getting Web2 users into Web3 has been that onboarding friction.
Right. I mean, for example, I know at Immutable, really interesting to see all the work they've been doing on kind of connecting games to marketplaces, to kind of passports, and just making that experience a lot more seamless, like easier access to great games. Oh, sorry, I probably threw you off course a little bit by jumping ahead, but
it was a while ago that people started saying, just make a great game, just make a great game. I gotta say, I was never on board with that slogan. I actually think we haven't explored blockchain fundamentals far enough to actually understand why we're even implementing blockchain in games at all. I'm actually really interested in people who are exploring now things like fully on-chain games and even autonomous worlds, which are going the other way. So these games, a lot of them are quite difficult to play. They have a level of technical aptitude that you need to have to be able to enjoy them, but they are really leaning into decentralization to figure out, well, how could blockchain be used to create something brand new that was never possible without blockchain? And I think that's sort of going to become almost like our R&D sector for all of blockchain gaming.
Very cool. Hey, can I just ask you one question about it? So fully on-chain games, that sounds super interesting. What are we talking there? Is that servers, or is it governance? Is it everything? Yeah.
Everything. So,
cool.
And that's why these games are slow, clunky, hard to use. You put absolutely every state of the game on chain. So it's not just the assets. Like when we're talking about the Web 2.5 games, you will have the assets on chain, like anything that's tradable, basically. So like your NFTs, your tokens, They're all the things that you'll find in the secondary market, and players can quite easily exchange those. But the actual game state, the logic is all, it's just basically put on normal Web2 servers. So you can't actually sort of play around with that in terms of, how could you make it completely permissionless and open, for example. With fully on-chain games, if you do have everything on a blockchain, it does make it fully decentralized. And I guess to take a step back there, it doesn't really matter what you're building in blockchain. I think there's always a push and pull between decentralization and centralization. Although we all bang on about how great decentralization is, like, the fact of the matter is that it's hard. It's very hard for people to get into. It's hard for people to use. And I think when anyone is sort of chasing after a mass audience, there's this temptation to kind of slide down the spectrum back towards centralization, because it just makes it easier for users, it does. But with these fully on-chain games, they're going 100% decentralized, and they all sit on a spectrum as well. And it's amazing to kind of get into the debates too, where people are even talking about, well, not just the game, but also the protocol itself. Like, Solana's not as decentralized as Ethereum. So if you're, and so on. But basically the idea is that if we were to lean into that concept of decentralization, what new ideas could it bring up? And one thing that I'm very, very interested in is UGC, like user-generated content, and modding. So modding is already huge in Web2 games. Some of the most loved games of all time were actually mods. But it's this weird sort of state where, if the developer doesn't mind people hacking into the game and forking it and creating a brand new experience, then off you go, you can have a great time. But if they wanted to say, actually, that's against our terms and conditions, you can't do that, and potentially even sue you, then they absolutely can do that too. The idea with these fully on-chain games is that you could open up these creator economies in ways that we have never been able to see before, because they would be completely permissionless and designed for people to come in and really build out whole new worlds. That's why a lot of people are calling fully on-chain games autonomous worlds, because once they're deployed, there is no central person or team that can control it. It's completely on-chain. It's all managed by smart contracts, and it's up to the community to govern it and continue to build it and create new experiences. So, like I said, it's quite technical, and I don't think it's quite ready for a mass audience. There are some people looking at doing things like no code UGC and modding for fully on-chain games, which would be very interesting. But to me, I think that's a very exciting space that, I'm really glad that people are doing that, because for a while, it wasn't cool to be a blockchain game. we've come like a full 360 back to the beginning, where people are sort of really experimenting with the technology just to see what cool stuff they can do with it.
Amazing. Well, I know what I'm going to be researching for the next couple of days now that you've told me about fully on-chain games.
There's a new standard called ERC 6551. And the way people are describing it is it's like a backpack NFT. So what it does is it turns an NFT into a wallet so it can own other NFTs. Sounds simple, but the applications for this, I think, are massive. There's already a game that is doing this. It's called Parallel Colony. And when you actually couple 6551 with AI, what you could do is potentially have an avatar in a game. You give it some directions and tell it what you want it to do that day, like an AI, and it can go off in the game and complete all those tasks that you instructed it to do, which is exactly what you can do in Parallel Colony. It'll go around and collect various tokens, NFTs, maybe even complete certain quests. And then it comes back at the end of the day and, shares what it has been able to achieve in the game. It was even things like, for example, if you've got like a cool PFP, like a Bored Ape or a Pudgy Penguin or whatever, this particular standard would make it so that that particular NFT could actually own other NFTs. And when we start seeing some even, say, cross-chain applications of this, it's pretty interesting if people are actually building the standard. So you could have, a PFP that can actually change its clothes, things like that. So I'm very, very excited about that standard. I think it's probably the most exciting thing that we've seen since NFTs were introduced. When people
Yeah.
started learning about them sort of back in I guess it really burst onto the scene in 2021. But yeah, it's pretty cool.
We're approaching Christmas. If you're going to be able to have a little bit of time off over the break, what are you going to be playing?
Oh, over the Christmas holidays?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I, again, full disclosure, I'm an investor and advisor in Crypto Unicorns by Laguna Games. I really love playing that game. I've been into the land gameplay for quite some time, and I'm just very busy sort of leveling up all my carts and tool sheds and lands and all those sorts of things. But they recently released this new game, Rainbow Rumble, which I really suck at. Oh my God, I'm so bad. So I was just playing with Mitch Vella, who was their marketing manager the other day, and he's really good at it, but he was being very encouraging that I just need to keep practicing and I will improve my skill set. I don't know if I'm as confident, but I'm going to keep trying because they have big prize pools and stuff like that. They're giving away a lot of RBW, their token. So yeah, I should probably try and get better at that. Another one that we are invested in, but again, I love it, is My Pet Hooligan. So this particular game is, I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's kind of like Grand Theft Auto meets Pixar. So very cute bunnies, but they are hooligans running around being, causing total anarchy. So that is definitely worth checking out. And it's on the Epic Games Store, so much easier to access than some games. We just had the Yield Guild Games YGG Web3 Games Summit in Manila, Philippines, a few weeks ago. My company Emfarsis led content and programming for the summit, but it was awesome because we had more than 40 games there that were all playable now, which, a couple of years ago was just unimaginable, basically, because I think for a long time people thought the only game available was AxieInfinity. But now there are just so many games to choose from, and I think there's something for everyone. Whether you like first-person shooter games, or you like strategy card games, or you like land gameplay, or even car racing, there's just something for everyone, and also across different genres as well. So, you could be, might be an MMORPG, or you might just be doing like a hyper casual game. Do you remember the Pixelmon NFT drop with?
Yep.
Yeah. The controversial Kevin who became a meme. Disclosure, I own a Kevin and I love him. But this game came out, first hyper casual game on base, and people absolutely loved it. So, again, I think a lot of people thought that, NFT games or Web3 games or blockchain games, whatever you call them, they have to fit into a certain category or style. And what we're seeing now is that has really built out. So there's just so many different types of games for people to choose from. Discovery is still a challenge in terms of where to go, but honestly, I get all my alpha from Twitter, crypto Twitter. So I would jump on there, follow me, and I'll be tweeting about different games from time to time too.
Personally, I'm definitely going to be checking out My Pet Hooligan. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, everyone loves My Pet Hooligan. It's actually so the chief animation or chief creative officer over there actually worked for Pixar for many years and has created much loved characters. He worked on Toy Story 1 and 2. And with some of
Amazing.
He's worked alongside some of the greatest directors in the whole world, like Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese. So when you see that game, you'll be like, oh yeah, I can see this was made by a very talented animator.
Amazing. Well, listen, we'll be sure to add links not only to where people can find the report that you guys have just produced, but also links to all the games you mentioned, and also where everybody can go and follow you on Twitter for more alpha and much more cool gaming content. That just leads me to say a really big thank you to everybody for tuning in to today's episode. Do subscribe to our channel. There's plenty more episodes like this one. And if you're interested in learning a little bit more about Leah and the work that she does with the Blockchain Game Alliance, Emfarsis, or indeed just having a play of any of the cool games that Leah recommended, as well as where you can follow her on Twitter, we'll add all of those links into the video description. Thanks for tuning in.